The unexpected pas de deux. Ethan Sterling had mastered control. His life, a meticulously crafted symphony of success, was orchestrated with precision. His business empire thrived under his iron will, and his opulent estate ran with clockwork efficiency. Surprises were unwelcome, which is why what he witnessed that afternoon, as he strolled past the grand windows overlooking his manicured gardens, stopped him dead in his tracks. His 12-year-old son, Oliver, was dancing. But not alone. His partner was Clara, their unassuming house manager, a woman he'd barely acknowledged since her arrival 6 months prior. The unexpected tableau stunned Ethan. He blinked, questioning his own perception. Yet there they were, moving across the lawn in an unlikely synchronicity. Oliver's steps were tentative, yet marked by an uncharacteristic focus. He stumbled, more than once, but instead of frustration, a genuine, carefree laugh escaped his lips, a sound Ethan hadn't heard in years. Since his mother's passing, Oliver had retreated into himself, locked away in silence. Now, Clara had coaxed out a smile. Clara moved with an understated grace that belied her position. Each step was precise, deliberate, not mere improvisation, but the execution of someone formally trained. She wasn't simply indulging a child's whim. She was guiding him, teaching him. A knot of unease tightened in Ethan's chest. He didn't like the idea that someone else, especially a household employee, wielded such influence over his son. As he continued to observe, his irritation grew. With a rigid posture, he strode outside, his footsteps echoing on the stone path. Clara and Oliver noticed his approach. Oliver froze, his joy replaced by apprehension. Clara, however, remained composed, simply wiping her hands on her apron before meeting Ethan's gaze. "What is going on here?" Ethan's voice was cold, controlled. Oliver lowered his head. "We were practicing, sir," Clara said simply. "Practicing what, exactly?" "Your son wanted to learn to dance." Ethan turned his attention to Oliver. "Since when?" The boy hesitated, shuffling his feet. For a while now, he admitted quietly. A sharp pang of guilt stabbed at Ethan. He had never noticed. He had never asked. "And why didn't you tell me?" Oliver shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. "Because he had no one to practice with," Clara interjected. Ethan's eyes narrowed. There was a firmness in her tone that grated on him. "This isn't your job." "No, it isn't," Clara agreed. "Then why are you doing it?" She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "Because he asked me to." Ethan turned back to his son. "Is that true?" Oliver nodded. A heavy silence hung in the air. Ethan exhaled slowly, irritation gnawing at his composure. He had no logical reason to be so bothered, yet he was. Something about the situation felt off, as if there were hidden layers he couldn't perceive. "I need to speak with you alone," Ethan said, his gaze returning to Clara. Oliver's brows furrowed with concern. Clara, however, remained calm. "As you wish, sir." Ethan turned sharply and headed back inside, not waiting for her to follow. As he stepped through the doorway, he glanced back. Oliver leaned toward Clara, whispering something. She responded quietly, her expression enigmatic, and the boy offered a small, conspiratorial smile. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Something more was at play here, something he wasn't seeing, and he was determined to uncover it. In his study, Ethan steepled his fingers beneath his chin as he stared at his computer screen. The information before him was both mundane and disquieting. Clara Ruiz, 29 years old. Employed as house manager for 6 months. No criminal record. No history of financial instability. By all accounts, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a capable employee who did her job and stayed out of trouble. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to her story. His instincts had never failed him in business. He built his empire on sensing when something wasn't as it seemed. Now, those same instincts screamed that Clara was not just a house manager. He typed her name into a broader search, adding a keyword that had been at the back of his mind ever since he'd seen her dance: Clara Ruiz, ballerina. At first, nothing. Then, buried beneath irrelevant results, he found it, a news article from 7 years ago. Ethan leaned forward, scanning the headline: "Young ballet prodigy disappears from the stage without explanation." His pulse quickened. He clicked the link. As the page loaded, a photo of a much younger Clara appeared on the screen. She was dressed in a pristine white ballet costume, standing on a grand stage, her arms lifted in perfect form. Her expression was serene, confident, nothing like the reserved woman who managed his household. The article described a rising star in the ballet world, a dancer of unparalleled talent. She had performed in prestigious theaters and was on the cusp of an international career. Then, suddenly, without scandal or public incident, she vanished from the spotlight. No interviews, no explanations, just gone. Ethan sat back in his chair, exhaling sharply. Why would someone with that kind of talent abandon her future? And how had she ended up here, managing his house? The question swirled. He knew he wouldn't get answers by staring at a screen. He needed to hear the truth from her. Abruptly, he strode out of his study and made his way to the kitchen. Clara was there, methodically cleaning the countertops. She glanced up as he entered, her expression neutral, but guarded. "Mr. Sterling," she greeted, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Is there something you need?" Ethan didn't waste time. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the counter, the article about her displayed on the screen. Care to explain this? For the first time since he'd met her, he saw a genuine surprise flicker across her face. It was brief, but unmistakable. She didn't immediately respond. Instead, she looked at the screen, then back at him. "You've been searching for me." Her voice was calm, but with an undercurrent of caution. Ethan folded his arms. "I don't like mysteries in my home." Clara exhaled slowly and put down the dish towel. For a moment, he thought she might refuse to answer. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. "I suppose I should have expected this," she said quietly. "You're not the type of man to let things go unanswered." Ethan didn't respond. He just waited. She looked at the article again, her fingers brushing against the edge of the counter. "I was a dancer," she admitted. "A long time ago." "You were more than just a dancer," Ethan corrected. "You were a star." A bitter smile touched her lips. A star that burned out before it could truly shine. Ethan studied her carefully. "Why did you leave?" She hesitated. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the way she weighed whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she sighed. "Because I lost everything." Her voice was quieter now, more vulnerable than he'd ever heard it. He didn't push, just waited for her to continue. "When I was 22, dance was my entire world. It was all I knew, all I cared about," she said. "I trained endlessly, pushing myself beyond my limits because I believed I was meant for something greater." She paused, then added, "And I wasn't alone." Ethan frowned. "Who?" "My fiancé," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Adrian. He was a dancer, too. We had trained together since we were children. We were supposed to take on the world together. We were offered an international tour, a dream we had worked for our entire lives." Something in her tone made Ethan's stomach tighten. He already knew where this was going. "The day before our biggest performance, Adrian was hit by a car," she continued, her eyes unfocused, lost in the memory. "He died instantly." Ethan remained silent, the weight of her words settling between them, heavy and undeniable. "After that, I couldn't dance," she said. "I couldn't even hear music without feeling like a part of me had been ripped away. Everything I had built my life around was gone. And so, I disappeared." Ethan let her words sink in. He had expected something tragic, but not this. Not a grief so raw it had driven her to abandon her entire identity. "So, you became a house manager?" he asked, not unkindly. Clara let out a breath of amusement, that there was no real humor in it. "I needed something far removed from dance. Something practical. Something safe." Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "And now?" He met her gaze, her expression unreadable. "Now you teach my son." The words hit him harder than he expected. He knew she didn't mean it as a challenge, but it felt like one. She had walked away from dance, but for some reason, she had chosen to share it with Oliver. Why? What made her decide to break her own rule for his son? "You could have kept ignoring it," Ethan said slowly. "Why help him?" She hesitated, but then said, "Because he reminds me of myself at his age." Ethan stiffened. Clara's expression softened. "Because he doesn't smile, Mr. Sterling." The words hit like a fist to the chest. Ethan clenched his jaw, but he couldn't deny the truth in them. His son had been fading ever since his mother died, retreating into himself, into books and routines. He had thought that giving Oliver stability and security was enough, but Clara had seen something he had missed. "He smiles when he dances," she added, "and I think he just needed someone to listen." Ethan swallowed hard, turning away slightly. He had spent years ensuring his son had everything he needed, except perhaps the one thing that mattered most. After a moment, he exhaled. "And what are you planning to do?" Clara tilted her head. "You mean, will I force him to dance like it's some kind of solution to everything?" She shook her head. "No. I just want him to feel something again. The rest is up to him." Ethan sat with that for a long moment, absorbing everything. He had always prided himself on being in control, on knowing everything that happened in his house. Yet somehow, he had been blind to the most important thing of all, his own son's happiness. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "I don't like people interfering in my family." Clara didn't flinch. "And I don't like seeing children who have forgotten how to be children." A thick silence stretched between them. Ethan had no response, because in the depths of his mind, he knew she was right.